been shown to us already, and I think it would be really good to show our appreciation in the usual way for the Indian government and for the GJEPC. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me. Now, I'm delighted to say that we have the Indian Commerce Secretary who is going to address us about the importance of the diamond industry to India. So, Mr. Rajiv Kerr, I would like to invite you to step up to address the World Diamond Conference. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me thank GJEPC for offering this opportunity of talking to you on something which is extremely relevant and important for India, as the gems and jewelry sector is a very prominent player in India's foreign trade basket. I won't just call it export basket because it has an equal share in the imports. Diamonds, as part of the gems and jewelry sector, have a different role to play, and I'm sure we've been hearing this since yesterday. We had the pleasure and privilege of seeing two great leaders in the afternoon yesterday. In their inaugural plenary, they laid out the kind of setting that exists and the kind of setting that lays out for future for the diamond sectors. And therefore, we see that diamonds over the next several years are going to play a significant part, of course, by themselves and in the overall context of the gem and jewelry sector in India's foreign trade and consequently in its global trade profile. This is the first time that a global conference of this nature has been organized, and it is indeed a pleasure and privilege to see so many people coming from all walks of all parts of the world relevant for the diamond sector to make it to Delhi and to exchange their views on subject which otherwise has remained relatively undiscussed in a global setting, and therefore this organization of this conference in our perspective, appears to be an extremely desirable and useful purpose. Having said that, since the topic I am supposed to speak is on India's the role that diamonds play in the Indian overall Indian foreign trade profile, I don't think it requires the knowledge of space science to understand. In a basket, in an export basket of $314 billion US, diamonds, or let me say the gems and jewelry sector, composes about 15% of our exports. It is second in the overall scale. The first one, of course, is the petroleum and petroleum products, and that takes away about 37%. So between diamonds, between gems and jewelry and petroleum products, we take about almost 50% of our export basket. It's 46 or so. Clearly, we are talking of two crucial sectors. Petroleum, because we have huge refining capacities and because we act like an entrepot for petroleum products for regions in the vicinity in Africa, and therefore, for obvious reasons, we are the major importer of petroleum, and the crude petroleum, and then the refining capacities created here contribute in a significant manner. So there you can see that there is a clear rationale which is built into India's need for imports and large capacities for refining existing, and therefore there is a natural position that petroleum products have in our overall foreign trade profile. But gems and jewelry, and particularly diamonds, are essentially a manifestation of the fact that India is home to the largest population of diamond craftsmen, artisans. And clearly this is an art, this is something which has got concentrated in India, and specifically in some regions. And I think that is what, over time, has evolved into India's major strength, the skill evolution, the skill accumulation, and the skills relating to not just crafting, but also to marketing. The entrepreneurial drive which has driven the Indian gems and jewelry, particularly the diamond sector. So clearly diamond and gems and jewelry sector as such occupies an extremely important place in India's export and import profile. Having said that, I think another significant aspect that one needs to keep in mind is the huge social connect, the huge socio-economic connect which diamond has with Indian economy. 3.5 million people are said to be dependent on livelihoods that they derive out of the gem and jewelry sector. Particularly, we understand that the diamond subsector supports about 1 million odd people in different walks of diamond trade, diamond trading, diamond craftsmanship, and so on. So it is not simply a sector which offers huge contribution to the Indian export and import basket, but it is also a much more important contributor to India's employment profile, and I think that is where the development policy impetus to diamond comes in from. Despite the fact that in terms of value addition, and I am moving from diamond to gems and jewelry, so please pardon me that, but clearly when you talk of the larger gold jewelry and sector, and then you compare it with the diamond sector as such, the value addition profile changes. You can have gold jewelry which may not invite a larger value add in it, but diamond cutting and polishing does involve a reasonable amount of value addition in terms of the craftsmanship which goes into it, but in the context of the high value of the product, the percentage goes down. But I think the bigger challenge for India now is to graduate to the next level of value addition, and that is convert this capacity to polish and cut diamonds to studding diamonds into jewelry. And I think that is where the real challenge now is. In the evolving paradigm of seeking greater value addition for all products that go out of this country, I think the more important thing is to locate various aspects, various opportunities where the value addition opportunities would make themselves available. And one of the most important areas, of course, is jewelry making, using diamonds, cut and polished here. And I think the follow-up to that naturally is the whole process of marketing. And marketing, and when I say marketing, I'm talking of branding, I'm talking of raising the level of just being a supplier of cut and polished diamond to reaching a point of retailing which is an extraordinarily complex and specialized skill-oriented job, particularly in this sector. So I think the diamond sector, amongst many challenges, the diamond sector as well as the gems and jewelry sector, amongst the many challenges that it faces, the more important challenges would be to give that additional value add by way of graduating to jewelry making based on diamonds, and then to see how to create brands, which is an extremely expensive and skillful job. I think one aspect which poses a lot of challenge to us is making ourselves, but there is little competition as of today, but I think it is equally important to see where is the competition coming out from and what is the process in which this competition tends to evolve over the next several years. Now this is an area which I'm sure the experts addressing the gems and jewelry sector would be cognizant of and would be addressing. But I think it is in the long run important to keep a track of the choice and trends which impact the diamond sector, because ultimately, as we go along, I think what is more important is to drive the human preferences rather than just respond to the preferences which are coming out from other countries. And I think that is where the whole issue of branding and the whole issue of designing and adding greater value by way of modern means of representation, etc., comes in. I think these are areas where there is a need for us to build additional capacities. These are areas where the diamond sector needs to focus on, primarily to build skills and capacities. I think one of the major endowments that India offers is a young population which can act both as consumers, driving the demand, and which can also give us a significant population of skilled manpower, specifically trained for this purpose. That is perhaps one of the major endowments. I had the chance of seeing one of such institutions recently, only a couple of days ago, in Jaipur, and I was very happy, very delighted to see the fact that everyone who gets out of that institution gets a job, and that is where the economic development impetus of the diamond sector or the gems and jewelry sector comes in, because if you link the growth of the sector with the overall economic development objective of the country, there is a natural connect and there is a natural drive for growth of that sector. And I think that is what we need to capture, that is what we need to work on. It was in this context that yesterday you heard the Honorable Prime Minister mention about the possibility, the decision to create a special notified zone for diamond trading, for rough diamond trading. And I think that is one of the major steps that will help in making India's product, which comes out of India, more competitive, and because you will be in a position to save that extra amount that goes out by way of commissions, by way of transaction costs, and so on. So I think this is where we need to play a bigger role in terms of trying to cut costs and also trying to see how newer elements of production, technology, production, marketing, branding, designing are on a very regular, in a very regular manner are introduced in the sector. So these are the major challenges. Now, clearly, wherever a country has offered itself as a country contributing the skills for manufacturing, it is invariably seen that the driving of that sector is not left to that country. the driving of that sector is left to those who market that product. And this is true for any product area. Because ultimately, the greater value is screened off in the marketing part of that exercise and not the production part of that exercise. That's true for leather, that's true for textiles, the upper reaches of garments, and so on. I think this is where the Indian industry's biggest challenge is. Because that is where, if you want to derive that extra penny out of this whole process of India's gems and jewelry and diamond trading is concerned, then you have to see how to position the sector on some of those 4 or 5 parameters that I mentioned earlier. Because that is where you will save that penny to add to your income, and that is where the newer skills, the newer capacities, the better utilization of the new demography, etc. will come in. So today, the Department of Commerce proposes to basically focus on this aspect of, again I want to interchangeably use gems and jewelry sector and diamond as such. Because the usual run-of-the-mill modicum of operating of a sector gives you an advantage only to a point, and thereafter your competitiveness comes out of how you skillfully manipulate the various production and marketing processes of that sector. And I think that is the biggest challenge that you have. So we propose to work together with the gems and jewelry industry. We propose to work together with all stakeholders within the country and outside, and try and see how we can continue to derive greater value than what we are deriving out of this sector for the benefit of the country, and how we can create more employment opportunities for the country over the next few years. That is all about that I would like to say. Thank you so much. I'm sure we will have and fruitful discussions. Thank you so much.
Outside as well. I'd now like to call on Mr. Vipul Shah, the chairman of the GJEPC, and Mr. Alex Popov, the chairman of the WMDF, to present a token of appreciation to Mr. Kerr and to the government of India. Emphasised for a moment the Commerce Secretary's remarks about the importance of branding, about marketing, about the use of technology, not just for the diamond industry, but indeed for all industries in the Indian economy. Quite clearly, there's a very proactive drive from the government of India. And we'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit more about that in our retail session. And in particular, the different types of approaches taken by different retailers right at the end of the diamond pipeline. So the interface with the consumers, the end product of all your efforts in the industry. But before that, we're going to focus on a very important aspect of the diamond trade, which is financing. Financing the diamond trade in difficult, challenging times. The challenges come not just from the industry itself, but from the wider international context. And of course, we all know that the global banking crisis, the problems with the financial sector have impacted on the diamond industry, like all other global industries. And to chair this session, I'm going to call on Haim Ebn-Zohar, who will masterfully steer you through the complexities of financing of the diamond industry. Thank you.
You ask yourself, what's the message? And yesterday morning we started out talking about how it is historical and how it is special, etc. And I have changed the message. After hearing the Honorable Commerce Secretary and getting the message from your Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, my taking away is that in 2015, the Indian diamond jewelry sector is starting its golden age. I think that is the message, and it is the truth, and it is, you work for it very hard. Now, Mr. Secretary, you mentioned about the integration with jewelry. The biggest market is the United States. You can wake me at 3 o'clock in the morning and I'll give you all the statistics. And we have the United States polished. They import about 18 billion. And most of it is all exported again. Domestically, the market, the diamond market is about 8 billion in America. But if I look at the statistics, it's only 2 billion of loose diamonds. Sir, already in America, as close to 70, if not more, percent of the diamond import is already set in jewelry. And it comes from India and China. Not only that, it comes from India and China. I mean, it is